things you don't know about The Crow. The Crow, Alex Proyas' 1994 cult film about a man brought back from the dead to avenge the murder of his fiancée, was marred by tragedy when its star Brandon Lee was killed in an on-set accident just days before the film was scheduled to wrap, and not long before he was to be married. Here are a few things you might have not known about the film. Number 1. It's based on a comic book which was inspired by two tragedies. In 1981, 21-year-old James O'Barr was drawing combat manuals in the Marines when he decided to start The Crow. He hoped it would be a healthy way of dealing with the death of his fiancée, who had been killed by a drunk driver. I tried all the typical angst-ridden outlets like substance abuse and going to clubs or parties every night and just basically trying to keep yourself numb for as long a period of time as possible, O'Barr told the Baltimore Sun in 1994. Eventually, I was smart enough to realize that was a dead end, so I thought perhaps putting something down on paper I could exercise some of that anger. Pivotal to his comic book's plotline was another tragedy O'Barr heard about. A couple killed over an engagement ring. I thought it was outlandish. A $30 ring. 2 lives wasted. He said in a book about the production called The Crow, the movie. That became the beginning of a focal point, and the idea was that there could be a love so strong that it could transcend death, that it could refuse the death, and the soul would not rest until it could set things right. Number 2. There was interest in turning the comic book into a movie early on. The Crow comic book debuted on February 1st, 1989. Shortly after the second issue came out, O'Barr, who at the time was doing into auto body work, was approached by a young director who was interested in buying the rights to The Crow for a one-time lump sum. All rights, all media in perpetuity. O'Barr said The Crow, the movie. But the money was pretty good, considering I was going to do it. But his friends convinced him to consult with a Hollywood agent, who advised O'Barr against selling the rights to the comics for a lump sum. Then right when the third issue was coming out, O'Barr met writer John Shirley and producer Jeff Moss, who were eager to adapt the book into a movie. Their enthusiasm convinced me that the film would be done correctly, O'Barr said. Even though it was for far less than what I had previously been offered, I was not selling out my copyright, and it was the best chance of the film turning out to be something I would want to see. I just went with my instincts. Number 3. Shirley and Moss made some changes to O'Barr's anti-hero. Shirley and Moss got to work right away adapting The Crow into a script. They made a few changes, downplaying Eric's drug use and bringing the love story to the fore. They also made The Crow an actual animal, not just Eric's psyche, as it is in the comic, that spoke to Eric telepathically. While Shirley worked on the script, Moss took the treatment and the comics and went about shopping the screenplay. Eventually, independent producer Ed Sherman signed on to help make the movie, and for the next 2 years, Shirley honed the script. He added an older brother for Sarah, a version of character from the comics, a younger girl with a drug addict for a mother who befriends Eric and Shirley, and turned the Skull Cowboy, a manifestation of Eric's mental anguish that appears 3 times in the comic, into a spirit guide. Eventually, O'Barr thought the creative team had gone too far with their changes, so he created a 10-page outline explaining the characters' motivations to get them back on track. Not long after, horror writer David J. Shaw, who produced Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 and Traitors 3 and 4, came on board to do a rewrite. He told pressmen that Eric Draven should be a gothic, rock, and roll Terminator. Shaw cut back on the number of villains, gave the remaining ones a clear hierarchy, and added Devil's Night as the motivating factor behind the initial attack on Eric and Shelley, just to give the villains a more esoteric agenda, he said in The Crow, the movie. Making that decision also grounded the movie in a society that regularly experienced fire and mayhem the night before Halloween. Number 4. The producers knew who they wanted to direct and star. Pressman had Alex Proyas, an Australian director who at the point had helmed music videos and commercials, but no features in mind to direct The Crow. Though Proyas was very much in demand in Hollywood, he was waiting for the right project. The Crow was it. He signed on in 1991. The producers first looked at musicians to fill the role of Eric Draven, among them Charlie Sexton, a rock star from Texas, but ultimately their first choice was Brandon Lee. At that point, Lee, son of famed actor Bruce Lee, had appeared in a few films but had not had a breakout role yet. We had considered some more established actor, and we were concerned that certain of these actors did not have that athletic ability, Pressman said in The Crow, the movie. Other people had the athletic ability but not the acting talent. points. Brandon Lee combined it all. When Brandon walked into the office, it was an immediate flash. We knew we had our Eric Draven that instant. Number 5. Lee asked for one character to be removed. Once Lee signed on to star in The Crow, he read the comic book. After the script was written, Alex Proyas and I went back to the comic book and tried to find the bits of the story that did not make it into the script. Lee said at one point during production. Proyas took Lee's feedback seriously and often incorporated his change into the script. That included cutting one supervillain, an Asian character, out to steal Eric's powers, who Lee thought was a stereotype. Number 6. It was tough to get the makeup right. There's a persistent rumor that Eric Draven's makeup was inspired by Alice Cooper or Kiss, and it's rumored that Obar denies. At a comics convention in 2009, Obar said the Crow's look came from a marionette mask which he saw painted on a theater in London. I thought it would be interesting to have the painful face with a smile forcibly drawn on. Regarding of what inspired the makeup, getting it right was very tough. It took between 35 minutes and an hour to apply the grease makeup, which could stay in place for hours. Special effects artist Lance Anderson created a rubber mask that had slits in it so that the pattern of the lines around the eyes and mouth would be consistent. But Proyas and Lee were not fans of the freshly applied look. The first few times Brandon and I looked at it, we were both really unhappy with it. Proyas admitted in the DVD commentary. It was hard to get to the point where it did not feel self-conscious. We were both happy with it when it was distressed. We almost wanted to sleep with the makeup and then come to set in the next day. That's when it would look really great. Number 7. David Patrick Kelly bought a vintage copy of Paradise Lost for the production. Some of the actors cast as villains in The Crow went through training to portray their characters. Lawrence Mason, for example, worked with stunt coordinator Jeff Imada to learn real-life knife fighting moves in order to play the Tintin. Others donned costumes. Michael Massey, who played Funboy, wore outfits inspired by Iggy Pop and some outfits taken directly from the comic. David Patrick Kelly, who portrayed T-Bird, used a more literary inspiration to get into character John Milton's Paradise Lost. T-Bird quotes Milton in the flashback sequences. Kelly bought an antique copy of the book to use in the scene. Number 8. They used ravens, not crows, during filming. Animal trainer Larry Madrid trained 5 ravens for the production. Because The Crow filmed at night, when ravens slay, he had to get the birds accustomed to that, as well as flying in the rain, which is also unnatural for the birds, and in a wind tunnel. One of the ravens also had to be trained to be comfortable sitting on Lee's shoulder. Number 9. The production employed plenty of tricks to get its shot. The Crow did not have a huge budget, so the filmmakers sometimes relied on trickery to get the shots they needed. For the opening sequence, which shows a city of fire, the production used miniatures and projection technology. They went to elaborate length to project flames into the miniature set. Proyas said in the DVD documentary, "We had a screen set up so we could project into the miniature on multiple passes. It was really the very early days of digital imagery, and we did not really have the money to use them, so we tried to do things in much more of an optical way." For one iconic shot in which Eric dumps a bunch of rings into the barrel of a shotgun and fires it, Proyas cut to some oversized rings being dropped towards the camera through a puff of smoke. He said in DVD commentary, "The way it's cut, you really think you are seeing a bunch of rings that were dropped into a shotgun." The production did not have the money or the space to shoot a car chase sequence, so they did it with miniatures instead. And the final rooftop confrontation between Eric and head villain Top Dollar Michael Wingott was shot not on the roof of a church but on modular pieces sitting on the soundstage floor that were made to look like a Gothic cathedral. Number 10. They used special effects too. For a scene in which the Crow attacks Mika, Anderson built a mechanical bird to do the attacking. It had separated controls for the wings and the claws. His shop also built mechanical hands that looked just like Lee's for a scene in which Eric is shot in the hand and his hand heals. What we ended up doing, Anderson said in The Crow, the movie was closing it to a point and then taking filter and filling the hole in so it could close totally clean and go away like stop motion. They also created a full dummy of Top Dollar to be used in climatic fight sequence where he is impaled on the horn of a gargoyle. Number 11. Obar makes a cameo. He is the looter who steals the television in the aftermath of the explosion at Gideon's pawn shop. Number 12. With just a few days left to film, Lee was killed in a tragic on-set accident. The cast and the crew worked along grueling hours in the rain and in the night on the set of The Crow, which was plagued misfortunes almost from the start. In February 1993, a carpenter was seriously injured on set when the crane he was working in hit live power line. That night, an equipment truck caught on fire. Later, a sculptor who had worked on the set for just a few days drove through the plaster shop after he was let go. A construction worker accidentally drove a screwdriver through his hand. Then in March, a storm destroyed some of the set, but the worst was yet to come. On March 31st, 1993, the production was filming a flashback sequence that showed how Eric died. As he walked into the apartment he shared with Shelley to find her being raped and beaten by top dollars, Funboy would pull out his .44 Magnum and shoot him. According to People, the script of Crow called for a close-up for the loaded weapon. The crew, following standard procedure, used dummy bullets, which are nothing more than bullets without gunpowder. When the close-up was finished, the gun was unloaded, then reloaded with blanks. Blanks sound as loud as real bullets, but when they were fired, only the harmless cardboard wadding with which they are packed is ejected from the gun. This time, though, the action was far from benign. Macy pulled the trigger, and Lee slammed to the ground, the size of quarter in his lower right abdomen. The crew did not realize that Lee was injured until Proyas called cut, and the actor did not get up. He was rushed to the hospital, but doctors could not save him. Lee died later that afternoon. He was just 28 years old. It took some time to figure out what had happened, but according to the Telegraph, both the dummy bullets and the blanks used to the production had hastily been fabricated by taking out the gunpowder from real bullets because of the time pressure crew members were under. The lead strip of the dummy bullet became lodged in the barrel of the gun and pushed out by the blank charge. It scratched the bottom of the shopping bag before perforating Lee's navel and managed to puncture the stem of the aorta, where it branches to provide blood supply to the leg. After the accident, Paramount, which had agreed to distribute the movie, dropped out, leaving the film in limbo. Miramax eventually picked it up. Producers, with permissions from Lee's family, wanted to finish the film, and after a 6-week bereavement period, the cast and crew returned to Wilmington to complete filming The Crow. No criminal charges were ever filed in Lee's death, but his mother, Linda Lee Cadwell, did file a lawsuit against the producers and the production company, which was eventually settled. In 2005, Macy spoke out about the accident for the first time. It absolutely was not supposed to happen. It was not even supposed to be handling the gun until we started shooting the scene and the director changed it. He said, "Afterwards, I just took a year off and I went back to New York and did not do anything. I did not work. What happened to Brandon was a tragic accident. I did not think you ever got over something like that." Number 13. After Lee's death, the script was reworked and one of the characters was cut. 1 month after Lee's death, Pressman and Proyas began rewriting the script, ultimately presenting, according to Entertainment Weekly, an emotionally softened, reworked script. The filmmakers opted to use Lee's half-finished scenes in montages, and they cut one character altogether, the Skull Cowboy, played by Michael Berryman, a sort of spirit guide who laid out the rules of Eric's return to the land of the living. According to The Crow, the movie, those rules were: ice the bad guys, receive a union with Shelley but work for the living. In the DVD commentary, Proyas said he cut the character for a number of reasons. "I was never happy with the effect. I felt he lowered the standard of the film, made it a little cheesy," he said, "but also because I felt that the character was kind of unnecessary. I feel that you get what's going on. You understand it. You don't really need someone telling you as an audience what's happening at various points." And that seemed to be the function that he was playing. He also only got to shoot one scene with him, and there were 2 other scenes planned that we did not get to shoot. How do you make more of him without Brandon to relate to him? And why would you even want to bother? It was an easy decision to drop him. The Skull Cowboy's exposition was replaced with Sarah's narration, and Eric only becomes mortal when the crow he has been following is killed. Other scenes that ended up on the cutting room floor involved Skank Angel David being robbed by children and an extended fight sequence between Eric and Funboy in which Funboy actually owns Eric. Proyas said on the DVD that they cut the fight for 2 reasons. One, because now that the Skull Cowboy was gone, the concept that Eric doing something for the living would make him vulnerable was not clear, and also because we had so little time to shoot the fight scene that Brandon and I, neither of us were particularly happy with the result. Proyas said he had choreographed a really beautiful sequence, and I really had not been able to capture it in the time we had. Thanks to the changes, in a way the film became about something different. One source told Entertainment Weekly, it became about how you deal with grief. What happens when someone you love is taken from you? How do you incorporate that into your life? Number 14. Cutting-edge visual effects were used to complete the film after Lee's death. In addition to having doubles standing for Lee and filming those scenes as long shots in shadows, the production relied on the VFX company DreamQuest Images to fill in some of the blanks. Using footage of Lee from other sequences, the visual effects company finished 7 shots. In one sequence where Eric enters his abandoned lot, DreamQuest took a shot of Lee stumbling down an alley and digitally removed the background by adding a matte painting of a doorway. They were able to make it look like he was actually walking into his apartment. In another shot where Eric sees himself in a broken mirror, DreamQuest once again digitally isolated Lee from an outside shot, using a shot of a double in front of a shattered mirror as a guide. They were able to create a grid that allowed them to composite Lee's image into the mirror. Even more extraordinary, the company did this on handheld footage, a far cry from most visual effects shots at the time, which were carefully planned and staged and shot with a steady camera. Just developed image tracking software helped them pull it off. Number 15. Executives were worried that audiences would not get it. In the very first test screenings, we had 2 or 3 people out of 300 would ask, why is that Eric Draven is the guy that can come back with these powers? Why can he come back from the dead? Proyas recalled in DVD commentary, I'm going, who the hell cares? I remember this was a really very big thing for everyone at that time. But now see the movie, it's obviously ludicrous. It's a suspension of disbelief and people go with it. Number 16. The film was a hit. The Crow was released on May 13, 1994 and was the number 1 movie in America in its first weekend. Critics including Roger Ebert and Rolling Stone's Peter Travis praised the movie. Its total domestic gross was nearly $51 million. Number 17. Obar donated most of his profits from the film to charity. Obar bought his mom a car and a surround system for himself, then donated the rest. I was really good friends with Brandon, so it just felt like blood money to me, he said at a comic convention in 2009. I did not want to profit at his expense, and I kept that secret for as long as I could. It's not charity if you get credit for it. Number 18. It spawned several sequels. It was not utmost in my mind to create a franchise, but I was aware that it could do that, and you don't want to make that impossible, Proyas said in the DVD commentary. You can see all the elements there. If Eric Draven was going to come back again, there had to be some layers to it. There had to be some reasons for him to come back. I would have been delighted to make The Crow too, but if Brandon had been involved, we would have made a great movie. Even without Lee though, the sequels came. The Crow, City of Angels, starring Mia Krishner as Sarah and Vincent Perez as the Crow, Ash Groven, was released in 1996. In 1998, there was a short-lived TV series called The Crow Stairway to Heaven, starring Mark Dacascos. Then in 2000, Kristen Dunst and Eric Mabius starred in another movie, The Crow Salvation. That was followed in 2005 by The Crow Wicked Prayer, which starred Tara Reid, David Boreanaz and Edward Furlong. Number 19. Other people were considered for the lead role. Even though The Crow was fairly low-budget affair, it still had a cast of established actors and would have definitely benefited from an A-list hit. Interestingly, because of the original comic books, rock music influence, and its many references to real musicians, producers initially considered casting a musician in the role of Eric Draven, thinking that a rocker would be a good fit for the obviously rock and roll inspired anti-hero. Obar has different ideas. Obviously, you want to shoot for the moon when dream casting a movie based on something you wrote. Obar was thinking that Johnny Depp, Christian Slater, and River Phoenix would have all been good fits for the lead. Ultimately, Brandon Lee was chosen in large part because he had the physicality necessary for the role in addition to the acting chops. Number 20. There were many misconceptions about the tragic accident. When someone leaves the world during filming of of a movie, there is bound to be all manners of myth and exaggeration that surroundings that event, and Brandon Lee's passing is certainly no exception, with much false information being perpetuated about the incident over the years. One of the most persistent rumors is that the moment that Lee lost his life as the result of malfunctioning gun can be seen during the movie. This is patently false, and in fact, great lengths seems to have been gone through to ensure that footage never be leaked. Additionally, many have been claimed that Lee's life was lost instantly, but the reality is that he went through 6 hours of surgery before he ultimately lost his battle. Number 21. It was one of the many accidents on set. While what happened to Brandon Lee is no doubt the biggest tragedy that occurred during the making of The Crow, the production had already been beset by accidents and injuries even before that unfortunate accident. Among the accidents that took place in the set of The Crow were a carpenter driving a screwdriver through his hand, a stuntman falling through a roof, a disgruntled fired crew member driving his car into an on-set workshop, an injury caused by a crane hitting live power lines, and a bad storm destroying large portions of the set. Whether you believe in cars or not, that seems like a lot of mishaps occurred during the making of the movie. Number 22. The script took 2 years to write. While the turnaround time between the original publication of The Crow comic book and the release of the movie adaptation was fairly quick, only 5 years, it actually could have happened even sooner if the script was not so hard to get just right. Original script writer John Shirley, known primarily for his work in print, had spent a fair amount of time crafting the movie but was not quite pulling it together. He was eventually joined by David J. Shaw, who brought in some of the darker, more horror-flavored elements. In total, the script was said to have spent at least 2 years as a work in progress before a shooting script was settled on between the two co-writers. Number 23. The unexpected method actor. Actor David Patrick Kelly is so a stranger to appearing in beloved cult hits, first gaining fame as the main antagonist in The Warriors and going on to appear in Twin Peaks and of course The Crow. It seems like the kind of actor that goes all in no matter what the project he is in, as evidenced by the length he went to get into the character of T-Bird in The Crow. The epic poem Paradise Lost influenced the production of The Crow pretty heavily. Alex Proyas is such a fan that he attempted to adapt it into a movie early 2010. Kelly turned to the poem to inform his portrayal of T-Bird, going so far as to buy a vintage printing of the poem and then reading his actual copy in a scene of the movie.
Number 28. It was almost a musical with Michael Jackson. The tone, ambience, aesthetic and general mood of The Crow is pure gothic cheap, and yet there is an earnestness to it that yearns to be taken seriously. Thanks to top-notch performances by all players who know when to mark and when to wink at the audience, it neither takes itself too seriously nor is ever too ridiculous. However, had early suggestions been taken into consideration, it would have been a musical starring Michael Jackson. Paramount executives thought the look Jackson brought to his music videos for Bad and Dirty Diana was perfect for Eric Draven. Plus, Eric was a musician, so to them it only made sense that there would be songs in it. When it was brought to author James O'Barr, he purportedly laughed hysterically before rejecting the idea, afraid every fight scene would look like something out of the gang violence in West Side Story. Number 29. The screenplay was co-written by a horror writer. When the first draft of the script were exchanged between writer John Shirley and author James O'Barr, he was worried that too many changes to his comic had been made. While he could understand downplaying the hero's drug use and the removal of minor characters, he felt it was going in an uncomfortable creative direction. David J. Shaw, writer of Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, as well as Critters 3 and 4, came on board to collaborate and return the story its core concept. It showed that axed a lot of superfluous feelings in favor of one main body and hierarchy of minions, as well as making Devil's Night, the famous night before Halloween known for arson and calamity in Detroit, the main reason for the attack on Eric and Shelley. He also made Eric Draven the gothic rock and roll Terminator we see on film.